Welcome back to Turning Hard Times into Good Times. I'm your host, Jay Taylor, and I'm really pleased to have with me a regular guest and friend of this show, Daniel McAdams. He's the executive director for the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Daniel, although I think most of our regular listeners certainly are, he served as a foreign affairs and civil liberties and defense policy advisor to Congressman Paul when he was in Congress. Welcome, Daniel, to Turning Hard Times into Good Times.
Hi, Jay. Thanks so much for having me again.
Really good to have you, and I know that you're working hard for the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. It is a wonderful website for people who care about liberty and freedom and care about our Constitution. So we want to talk about some of the serious issues that are posted there. I saw a survey, I think it was on Bloomberg, that said the biggest story for the American people in 2013 was the Edward Snowden revelation that our government is behaving more like a dictatorship than a democracy. America certainly is starting to resemble what, in my view, having read about Nazi Germany, resemble more of that kind of government than the country which I thought my father and various people at that age fought for in World War II to try to destroy the tyranny of the Nazi tyranny. But, you know, Ron Paul's Institute, you have a transcript of an interview you did on Russian television, and it's headed up, NSA has become a four-letter word in the United States, which sort of implies what I was just saying about Americans really have seen this as a very serious issue. There is no doubt that there's some blowback against the United States government for its police state tactics, but how far do you think, Daniel, this anger against our government for its destruction of our basic human rights, how far will the American people take this?
Well, I think it remains to be seen, and I think we can't forget that they still have plenty of tools in their toolbox. You know, the pro-police state people. As far as the polling numbers, you know, there are some things to be encouraged about. You know, right after the Snowden revelations came out, the Pew organization did a poll, found out that the majority, 56%, felt that the government was going way too far collecting information on us, and the 70% believe that the data is not really being used for what they say it's not being used just to fight terrorism. Mm-hmm. So that's a good sign, but, you know, they will fight back. They have so many supporters in Congress, unfortunately, and on both sides of the aisle. Peter King, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, is very dedicated to this destruction of our civil liberties. And look, you know, 60 Minutes did an episode, was it last week or a couple of weeks ago, which was a real whitewash of this whole NSA thing. It's only the Americans don't really understand what's happening. It's too complicated. And so I think, you know, they have a lot of propaganda tools left, but the numbers are encouraging if we can keep them up.
It kind of reminds me of economics, Daniel, where they say economics are too complicated for Americans to understand, so we're just going to throw these fancy equations at them and snowball them to hell.
Exactly. So, don't let them read Hazlitt.
Don't let them read the Austrian school. Don't let them put the real world together with economics, because they want to keep it detached. And I think the same thing goes with foreign policy. Well, in your interview with, I guess you did an interview with Russian television. They asked you about the Hackers Congress. It's apparently something that was taking place then in Hamburg, Germany. And according to Russian television, that they're trying to make people aware of encryption and privacy issues. How do you view the role of hackers in this war to protect our natural God-given rights? As our Constitution noted that it's not government that gives us our rights. Our rights are natural. They're given to us by God, the Creator, or if you don't believe in God, by natural law. So are these hackers going to be? Can we depend on hackers, or can the hackers be bought out by the NSA and its major war chest?
Yeah, that's why I feel a little hesitant. I mean, I think obviously if the government is trying to keep secrets that it has no business keeping, if the government's breaking the law, then lawbreakers, quote unquote, such as hackers, might be assistant to us. But if you look at the other hackers conferences that go on all the time, you always see the head of the NSA, the head of the CIA is addressing these hackers. And that's not to say that makes it illegitimate, but remember the intelligence agencies, intelligence community, they desperately need hackers. And so they infiltrate these groups. They want to be part of it. They want to address their conferences. And most recently, to their credit, there were a few boos and hisses when General Alexander was addressing this group, one group of hackers. But I think, cautiously optimistic, but, that's the sad thing about this police state. You don't know who to trust. That's how it was in East Germany. You couldn't trust anyone. So sadly, it feels like we're getting to that point.
Yeah, and if you're in the shoes of a young fella or a young lady that's come out of the university, you got to pay off your student loan, and you're given a job, and a big paying job, by a government that has endless funds, which it creates out of nothing, then, it would be very difficult for young people to say no to going to work for the bad guys. Sure.
And it's exciting. They make it sound very attractive, lots of travel and fun things. So, yeah. You're right.
Yeah, and then you got the Peter Kings of this world telling you what a great thing Nazism is.
Yeah, in his own way. Yeah, I mean,
he wouldn't use the word. He would probably like to throw people like us in jail for even accusing him of being a Nazi, of being a fascist. I think is probably a better word. But that economic fascism is not so difficult to understand, is it, Daniel? It's really corporatism. It's corporations and governments passing laws to circumvent the marketplace, essentially. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so I'd like to ask you a little bit about some more material that's been put on your website. The NSA lawsuit. There have been two rulings on that. One in favor of liberty, and then the second one going against the first ruling, overturning it. Update our listeners a little bit on that, Daniel, on the two rulings.
Sure. Well, the second one wasn't really overturning it. It was just a competing opinion, and that really that will send it more toward the Court of Appeals and probably eventually to the Supreme Court, I think, is the ultimate. However, I think, the one part that Judge Pauley, who did the second ruling, which, as you say, was against us, i.e., we freedom lovers, the one point he did make is that it really isn't just up to the judges to decide. The other two branches of government do have a role. And I think that's probably one of the few good points that he made in an otherwise, I think, terribly flawed, and I'm not an attorney, but a terribly flawed judgment, just philosophically. And if I can just touch on a couple of quick things,
Sure.
The one thing that he said, he said that this blunt tool, i.e. the metadata collection of all of our telephone information, it only works because it collects everything. So he's saying that, sorry guys, the only way we're able to protect this country is if we collect everything. Nothing can be uncollected. So it definitely encourages the NSA and these other organizations to go bigger, get more. More is better. And that's troubling. The second thing he says, which is just troubling, is that he said under Section 215 of the Patriot Act, you are not supposed to know the investigations that are taking place under Section 215. Therefore, ACLU, which is the one who introduced the lawsuit, you have no right to challenge this because you weren't supposed to know about it in the first place. The only reason you know about it is because an illegal act released it, i.e. the Snowden revelations. So it creates, in the Washington Post, there was a Washington Post writer who pointed this out very well, it creates sort of a Kafkaesque nightmare where the government, even if it were doing something objectively completely illegal under Section 215, you're not allowed to challenge it because you're not supposed to know about it. So what a joke and what a chilling effect that has on our liberties. Of course, as you and I know, Ron Paul warned about this at the very beginning when they were trying to pass the Patriot Act. But the other thing, if I can say really quickly, I think your viewers or your listeners particularly will be interested in this. He said, the right to be free from searches and seizures is fundamental but not absolute. And then he went on to say, this is a quote, basically it's no big deal that the government does this because, quote, every day people voluntarily surrender personal and seemingly private information to transnational corporations which exploit that data for profit. And and few think twice about it. That shows a fundamental lack of understanding between a voluntary commercial transaction that you and I and so many millions of others make and an involuntary collection of our personal information by the government.
Yeah.
And to confuse those two, I think, is absolutely egregious.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more about that. But I just don't understand how did we lose this sense of liberty, the rights of the individuals, when it was so ingrained in our society, with the founding fathers. I mean, what people don't seem to understand the dangers of this. What is to keep government, if nobody's allowed to know what government's doing, what is to keep government from witch hunting anybody who disagrees with their policies? What is to keep government from throwing Austrian economists in jail, for example, for suggesting that printing money is thievery?
Sure. I mean, you could make that argument. It's a danger to our national security to have Austrian economists running around.
And what about Christians? I mean, what's to say that Christians who think there's a God and God isn't Obama, that they shouldn't be thrown in the clinker?
Yeah, it is dangerous.
Or murdered.
Sure.
I mean, countries do that around this world. Countries kill people for their religious convictions and their faith. And our founding fathers were very concerned about that. As a matter of fact, the Pilgrims came here in part because of religious persecution. So now, I mean, there's a growing evidence that a lot of religions could be in harm's way as well from this sort of evolving police state that we have here.
Sure. And you ask what has given them the impetus to do this, and it really was fear, and the fear came from the 9/11 attack. They have exploited that to the hilt. And, I did a little piece on the Ron Paul Institute website today about Walter Pincus, who writes for the Washington Post, and he had this terrible article saying that even the very anemic reforms to the NSA that have been suggested by President Obama's task force would be terrible because any reduction could make us unsafe. And listen to this. Talk about a cheerleader for the regime, for the police state. This is his conclusion. If there is another attack, today's complainers may be as much at fault as the intelligence community.
So that's us. That's you and me.
Yeah. So we're going to be just as responsible as the guys who bomb this country if it happens again, because we're complaining about collection.
Well, that is a police state. That is chilling. That is very, 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 very frightening, I think, Daniel. This is where our country is headed. And we don't mean to scare people in this show, but people wake up and realize that what we have coming here is it's not a Sunday afternoon walk in the park by any means. We're going to have a lot of difficulty ahead of us. That's why the Ron Paul Institute is out there to warn people, to let people know. I don't know what we can do because, honestly, Daniel, my congressman doesn't give a rat's behind that I vote or don't vote for him. I don't give him any money. Corporations give him money, and they own him, and they get what they want written into the legislation that is never read by 90% of the congressmen because the legislation is too big and too onerous to even read.
Yeah.
So, it is, people need to be woken up, and my fear is that what happens is going to be too late. It maybe already is, but unless people really start to understand what I think is going to happen, my fear, Daniel, and we have to shut it off here, I say, is that we're going to have an economic collapse, a calamity of some kind, and that will be the excuse for martial law or something like that. Do you think am I crazy in suggesting that?
That's a big danger, and that's what Dr. Paul has always said. We're going to figure this thing out soon because we're running out of money. And that's, I think, when it gets ugly. I think you're right.
Well, on that not so happy note, I do want to wish you and your family a happy and safe, I can't underscore that word enough, safe New Year. Prosperous, we'll take that too, but first of all, happy and safe, I think, is the first two things I would wish for you and your family, Daniel, and thank you very much for coming on. I wanted to talk to you about the Dulles brothers. We'll ask you about that perhaps next week. Thank you so much for being with us. Okay, thank you.